This is it. It's an awareness of the problem a lot of times is the closest thing we'll come to solving it.
Also, the financial end of law enforcement is getting so much tighter than it has been that it's really it's a bad situation when you spend $1,000 or $1,500, let's say, to put a guy through police basic school and then lose him. It's more significant now than that was 5 years ago, just from a financial look at it.
And with federal funds going down the drain, we're really going to be hurt.
The state's recognizing some of this, and there's proposed changes right now with the commission that are dealing with this. In fact, some will be coming in effect September 1 to change some of these.
We'll still never have the big bucks like we used to, though.
I don't well know that.
I think the whole key to it is, like I said, keep a good, excellent recruiting program and keep the people that you've got happy and be open with them, be honest with your people.
Get them in the community.
And get them
involvement, total involvement.
Total involvement. You're going to keep them.
If they won't shift work and disappear, they can do that in a large department. A small department, that's the one thing the small department has going for them is everybody is an individual and a person.
That's right.
They're not a shift, you know.
They're not a number or something like that, an inanimate object. There's somebody.
There's no excuse for the chief in this city not to know every one of his officers and know their family and who they are and what their personal problems are, like you say.
In a department this size, sometime during the year, that patrolman's going to be a supervisor, you know, in charge of the, it might be just himself out working that day, but he will
Sergeant's going to get sick on his shift one of these days.
So.
And the chief sometimes can arrange due to assignment to see if this does happen.
Yeah. I think this would be a factor to show also.
Well, this involvement. Total involvement. So you may be a patrolman, however, you're still necessary. And face it, if the city had one officer, he'd be a patrolman. And that's something I think everybody has to remember.
Yeah. Chief.
Well, I didn't say what he would call himself. I didn't say what he'd call himself now. That's what he would be.
Be the chief shaking the doors at night.
That's it. That's something sometimes we lose sight of real quick. You can't be a supervisor without a supervisee. I think our hour, does everybody agree our hour's up? I mean, we can't ask if it's up. Does everybody agree our hour's up?
I think that we have resolved the 4 issues before us.
I believe so.
To the point that we're going to resolve it.
Hopefully we got the answers then. We don't have to go back over them.
I always find these things so informative. If I may have these, Don, are you going to do this here?
Yes. Okay. You can take a break right now.
Very brief. Oh, excuse me.
In comparison on a scale of 1 to 7, where you would rank yourself. Secondly, remove yourself from the group and consider everybody else objectively and rank order the group for me. And I have ranked 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then I left off because I wasn't sure if we'd have 7 or 8, so you'd put in a number 6. Don't put yourself in that ranking. You are no longer a part of the group, and you are called upon to rank order the group from the outside. Then after you rank ordered them, what were the major strengths or contributions to the person you ranked number 1? Then what were the major weaknesses or shortcomings of the person you ranked last? Then I want you to objectively forget about it and subjectively select one person each to fill in some of these blanks for some personal considerations. And you can use a person as often as you like. Can you call each other by name, first name or last name? Just guessing at first name. Do you have any sort of information about each other? You know, you don't have to put names. You can put blue suit, curly hair, brown shirt, whatever you want to. Let's review just a second. Wilson, first name?
George.
George.
Joe Lewis.
Joe Lewis. It's an easy one to remember.
Doug Davis.
Doug Davis.
James Bennett.
James Bennett.
Tom Bush.
Tom Bush.
Mike Miller.
Mike Miller.
Bill Beasley.
Bill Beasley. Now, thinking back, do you have a name for everybody? One more time. George.
George.
Joe. Doug.
James.
James. Tom. Mike. Bill Beasley. We'll start from backwards and go forwards.
It'd be easier
you're just the numbers of seating and you keep track of who's who?
It might be. In a case like that, that'd be all right. And it would be 1, 2, 3, James is 4, 5, Mike 6, 7. And that way you can rank them according to where they're seated now, and I can put a name to them later on. But I'm asking you, first of all, to rank yourself, then forget your participation. Rank order everybody else and tell me what you think were the strengths and contributions of the person you ranked 1, weaknesses of the person you ranked last, then subjectively look at it and answer these questions. I'm elected to this position. The person that I would most like to have as my assistant from among these peers would be. The person I would most enjoy socializing with would be. The person I would select as a team leader, and I'll expand that to say squadron leader, supervisor, problem solver, coordinator, special task force director, whatever you'd call that sort of function. And then the negatives of those: the person I would least like to have as my assistant, the person I would least enjoy socializing with, and the person I would not select as a team leader. And then scribble your initial or something at the bottom and we'll be in good shape. Any questions about that? As soon as you're finished, turn that page upside down and put it on your desk and go off and leave it.
People will be more aware of what to look for, and whenever something does happen or a suspicious person or activity in the community, these people will be trained and get the information that we need to hopefully apprehend these people. I think that some of the factors influencing the rising crime rate in our cities today is a lack of concern for law enforcement, not particularly by our citizens, but from our courts and from our Supreme Court. I feel like that they are leaning toward the rights of individuals or persons accused of crimes, and not towards society in itself. Also, the situation that we're into right now with inflation most definitely is a problem of causes increase. There's the lack again of I think that possibly in other areas in our juvenile crime is that I do not feel that parents today discipline their children as much as they should, and I don't mean by giving them whippings or spankings such as this. I don't think parents care as much or love their children as much as maybe they should. They want to pass it off on to somebody else. Also, both mother and father nowadays are having to work to support the family. That's usually 40 hours or 46 hours a week that they're away from the family. They come in, Daddy wants to read the paper, Mama's got to cook supper, and the kids are pushed off outside after being all day either at school or at a nursing facility, or not a nursing facility, I'm sorry, but a facility for child care. The kids come in and they're pushed off outside. I think there's not as much family involvement as there should be, or family activities as there should be. And I think this is a major influence in our juvenile crime. The influence that local chiefs should have in police training, our police academies, I think is we should be the ones to advise what we need. We've probably through our police officers on the street can come in and we, by study, know what type of training we need in our department. If we know the needs of our communities, then we can go back out and tell the academies what type of training that we need. And I think that if to some degree, you may want some business people on a board of directors or directors of academy, but mainly the police officers and chiefs themselves, the one that deal with this problem day to day and know the needs of the community and know the training that these officers need to make better officers in the community. That's all my response at this time.
And drop, and because of this we just see a gradual physical and I think to a large extent moral decay of what takes place in our city. And when these things happen, and especially when they happen concurrently, the ultimate product predictably is going to be an increase in the crime rate. My thoughts on the neighborhood crime prevention program are basically very positive thoughts, I think. The thrust of the crime prevention program is the involvement of the citizens in the community in such a way that they can actually help each other prevent crime. It's been a myth for some time in law enforcement that the police are capable of totally accepting the responsibility for crime prevention. This responsibility, to a very large extent, must rest on the citizens in the community. It would be, I think, realistically an unreasonable assumption that we can have a policeman on every street and in every neighborhood to try to prevent theft and the typical property crimes. Because of this, we have to rely on the citizens' law-abidingness and their willingness to get involved with their law enforcement agency, whatever that agency might be, in order to lessen the number of property offenses and in order to make a neighborhood crime prevention program effective. The bottom line is simply that neighborhood crime programs can work, but they can only work if the citizens in those communities are willing to get involved for their own benefit. I have no comment on item number 2.
Good job. Hey, now we're really through with you. At this point,
Really
you may want to go back and visit with Bob for just a little while. And
Go out and get a beer.
yeah, he'll be in communication with you later on. I have to respond to the camera rather than to me, and I'll get up and leave even. But because this is alive, I'm going to hand you the questions. You've not seen them before. You will immediately start reacting to them because the camera. Now, you can take time and look at it, whatever you want to do, but once you start, it's a live interview. You open it and close it the way you want to. As the guy said, you got no comment. I don't want to talk to reporters or whatever. Just be comfortable with it. Imagine that you're taping a live interview. I've just handed you the following 3 items. The camera started rolling. Please respond to any or all of the items in as brief but as complete a fashion as possible.
Item number 1, I believe the influence crime rate in the nation today is caused by narcotics. Also, the lack of some parents to supervise their children. We do not have the time here today to go into complete detail of this, but by the parents not supervising a juvenile as needed be, the child has nothing to turn to but to other people on the streets, which leads to the narcotics, the crimes to get the narcotics. On item number 2, how much influence should local chiefs of police exercise in curriculum development for police training academies? I feel that a chief in a community cannot make the sole decision himself. He's got to get with other chiefs in the community of his county to establish what is to be taught in these academies, because the needs of one city may be different from the needs of another. And on some instances, the officer may be drawn into another city to enforce the law in his own city. What are the thoughts on a neighborhood crime prevention program? On a neighborhood crime prevention program, I do not have any comments at this time. Is that all you need?
Rip it off, because it'll eat your time. There you go. I'll keep those. Handed you 3 items, and it started the cameras rolling. I want you to respond to any or all of the items in as brief but as complete as fashion as possible.
Thank you. For the first item on what I think the factors influencing the rising crime rate in our cities today, the biggest factor probably influencing crime today is that people are accepting crime. This sometimes isn't a very popular notion among citizens, but we have crime if we allow crime. If we, not me as chief, not the police department or the city council, but if the citizens themselves say we do not want to have crime, we will be able to, all working together, eliminate crime. And as far as pertaining to what influence local chiefs of police should have in the curriculum development for local police training academies, one thing that we have to remember is when the officer graduates from that training academy, he's going under the direct supervision of the chief of police. He hopefully is a product that has now been produced that is going to be able to work for that chief. And if he is not getting training that is valid in the eyes of the chief, then we're greatly weakening that man's idea of training. If he comes from an academy and the first thing that is said is by the chief, now you forget what you learned, it's now necessary for you to forget that classroom training, this is the way we do it here, well then we're losing a lot. We're losing a lot of time and effort, plus we're causing great confusion in the eye of our recruits. So what we want to look at is to see that the academy gets the input back from the end user, represented by the police chief, to make sure that the training is valid. As pertaining to a neighborhood crime prevention program, this goes back, also deals with the first item we commented on. We, the people, decide whether or not we're going to have crime or whether or not we're not going to have crime in our city. The next thing we have to look at is, if we decide we are not going to have crime, how do we implement this? One of the effective means that has been brought about is the idea we are all neighbors in our city. Working together as neighbors, we can do away with crime. It is not realistic to say we're going to do away with crime in the United States. We're going to do away with crime in Texas. On a limited scale, to even say whether or not we're going to do away with crime in Richland Hills. But it is not beyond our entire scope to say we can do away with crime in our neighborhood. This is my neighborhood. It belongs to me, not the criminal. This is a very effective means with this involvement to deal with crime. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. And also, don't bite your tie or your coat. They have teeth. There is your chief of police. Somebody's come into your office. I'm going to introduce the thing, but I won't be doing the interview. Only the camera will, so you will talk to the camera. Imagine that you're taping this live interview for a local television station. The interview has just handed you the following 3 items and started the camera rolling. You need to respond to any or all of the items you choose in a brief but as complete as fashion as possible.
In response to the first item here on factors influencing the rising crime rate in cities here in Texas, one of the many factors that have increased the crime rate, of course, across the nation and here in Texas is the community makeup. What type of citizenry are in the community, how much older folks there is versus younger folks, what's population density, and how close smaller towns are to larger communities. Of course, the closer in they are, the more travel the criminal gets, and the more apt that the crime rate is, or the crime is committed by citizens who are not members of the community. The increase in the rate of outsiders coming into a community has a very strong influence on the amount of clearance that the local police departments can have and the amount of impact that they can have on crime. With the respect to local chiefs of police exercising some control over the curriculum development of local police training, I feel very strong in training. One, that training is, of course, is the only means that we have to convey the knowledge which is required for people to conduct themselves as peace officers here in the state of Texas. that training is, or the results of training is best seen by the chief of police or the chief administrator or the administrators of local police departments as to what their local jurisdictions require in the way of training. For example, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense for a real strong homicide aspect placed on training if there is no homicides in the community. If local community has a major problem with crimes against property, then of course training needs to be stressed a little bit higher on property crimes. Of course, crime prevention is of course everybody's area that they should be involved in, particularly the police department, in that one thing, we have very little influence on crime itself as a police department. But as a police department, we can teach the citizenry or the members of the neighborhood what they can do to prevent crime. Of course, the more the citizen knows about the aspects of the criminal, what to look for, what type of programs that are available through the police departments, and what they can respond to, then the more the crime prevention has an impact upon our community. Crime prevention of course, primarily a function of the citizens, in that the police departments themselves are only the element to teach the community what they can do. There are more eyes out in the community among the neighborhoods with the neighborhood watch programs, operation identification, these type of programs, and citizens can have a very large impact. A criminal will not commit crimes if he knows that someone's watching him. Thank you.
This thing off so it won't bite your tie. Go over what we're supposed to. When we get ready to take this off, let me take it off, because it has a tendency to want to bite into a suit or something like that. Don't forget to walk off and leave it. Now, you the chief of police. Imagine that you're taping a live interview for a local television station. Now, the interviewer won't be here, so you'll have to respond solely to the camera. Okay. The interviewer, though, has handed you the following 3 items and has started his camera rolling. Please respond to any or all of the items in as brief but as complete a fashion as possible.
Okay, in response to item number 1, some of the factors that are influencing the rising crime rate in our city is because of the economic system that we are faced with now. People are not happy, they're not making the money that they feel like they are, and therefore more crimes are being committed. So we feel like this is probably the main influencing factor in the rising crime rate in our city. In response to how much influence the police chief should have in the training academies, we feel like here that is very important, because the chiefs are the ones that have to take these people and develop them, and so therefore we like to have an input into the academies themselves, into which some of the chiefs here in this area are on the board of directors for the academy and set up the curriculum for the academy. So we feel like this is very important, that the chiefs do need influence into this part of the academy. As for our crime prevention program here in the city, we feel like this is a very, very important part of it. It gets our citizens involved in the actual process of which we go through. It gives them an insight into how that we can function, what we can do and what we can't do. And it also gives them an idea of how they can help us, and that we can in turn come back and help them as being their police department. Thank you.
Chain to the desk. Let me unhook it when you do, because it wants to bite ties many times. Don't wait to eat your tie.
Okay.
Okay, you're the chief. We're in your office. Imagine that you're taping a live interview for a local television station. The interviewer will not be here, so you respond to the camera. He's grinding the camera for you. He's handed you the following 3 items for your consideration and started the camera rolling. please respond to any or all of the items in as brief but as complete as fashion as possible.
I think some of the factors influencing rising crime rate in our cities today are some of the attitudes of the people that live in these cities. I believe that it's the attitude of a rather apathetic attitude towards what their children are doing and what other folks are doing. They are folks that would rather not be involved. I suspect also that we invite crime. We're taking a look at so what, things are covered by insurance, and we can just not provide the security that we did in days before insurance seemed to cover our losses. Local chiefs should be very active in curriculum development for local police training academies, for their own benefit, for their community's benefit, and for the benefit of their police department. A neighborhood crime prevention program is imperative in any city today. There should be such things as Operation IDs, where people are encouraged to mark their valuables, where they should inventory the valuables in their homes. There should be neighborhood watch programs where neighbors are responsible for other neighbors' property. There should be what we call in my area a Blue Star program, where parents in a neighborhood are responsible for providing shelter for kids that are hurt or kids that are threatened on their way home from school. It's good public relations for a police department to be involved actively in preventing the crime from as opposed to going out catching somebody after something is done. I think that prevention is the primary purpose of a police department today.
Let it get your time. Okay.